Today, we're diving into a really compelling argument from our source material about what's going on in Venezuela. It suggests that the official stories we hear might be covering up a much bigger, much deeper economic battle.
So you have to ask, what are the real reasons for all the focus on Venezuela? We hear a lot about democracy, drug trafficking, or terrorism. But the analysis we're looking at today points to something else entirely, a hidden war for economic survival.
The core idea here is pretty radical. The source argues that this whole conflict has almost nothing to do with the reasons we're given. Instead, it's all about one thing: protecting the US dollar's 50-year reign as the world's most powerful currency.
And to even begin to understand this argument, you have to start with this number: 303 billion. That's how many barrels of oil Venezuela is sitting on. That's more than Saudi Arabia. It is the single largest proven reserve on the entire planet. And according to this analysis, that oil is the real prize.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the source's argument, we first need to pop the hood and look at the powerful financial engine it claims is being protected at all costs, the petrodollar system.
So what on earth is that? Well, put simply, it's a global deal that basically says if any country, anywhere in the world, wants to buy oil, they have to buy US dollars first to pay for it. This creates a massive, constant, and kind of artificial demand for American money.
And where did this come from? Well, the source points back to a deal in 1974 with Saudi Arabia. The arrangement was pretty straightforward. You agree to sell your oil only in US dollars, and in return, the US military will be your ultimate security guarantee. And this deal basically became the blueprint for the whole world. And you can see why this system is so important. According to the source, the benefits for the US are just incredible. It lets America run up huge debts and fund a gigantic military because it knows the rest of the world is forced to buy dollars to get the energy they need to survive. The analysis goes so far as to say this system is more important to American power than all its aircraft carriers combined.
All right, now this is where the story takes a much darker turn. The source material lays out a pretty striking historical pattern, arguing that there's a very clear and brutal track record of what happens when a leader decides to step out of line and challenge this system.
Just take a look at this. The source presents this timeline as Exhibit A. In 2000, Saddam Hussein starts selling Iraqi oil in euros. A few years later, the US invades, saying it's about WMDs that, were never found. And one of the first things that happens? Iraq's oil is switched right back to being sold in dollars. Then, you've got Gaddafi in Libya, who in 2009 proposes a gold-backed currency for Africa. He's overthrown in a NATO intervention just 2 years later.
And if you think that's just a coincidence, the source points to this direct quote from a leaked Hillary Clinton email. It suggests the real motivation in Libya wasn't just a humanitarian crisis, but a direct threat to the dollar's monopoly on the global energy trade.
And this quote, well, it pretty starkly punctuates the outcome. The leader who dared to challenge the system was eliminated. And according to this analysis, the idea of the gold dinar, it died right along with him.
So all of that brings this historical pattern right up to the present day. The source argues that Venezuela is simply the latest, and maybe the biggest, threat to this same financial world order.
And just look at the sheer scale of what we're talking about here. You could combine all the oil reserves of Iraq and Libya, and they are completely dwarfed by Venezuela. This is exactly why the source claims Venezuela isn't just another small challenge. It's seen as a potentially existential threat to the petrodollar system.
And according to the source, this wasn't just talk. Venezuela was making real moves. They started selling their oil in Chinese yuan, they tried to join the BRICS Economic Alliance, they even started building their own payment systems with China to get around the dollar-based SWIFT network. They were actively trying to break away.
The source then highlights this quote from a top US official to show the American perspective. The argument here is that Venezuelan oil was reframed in the public eye, not as a sovereign resource of another country, but as American wealth that was stolen. And that, of course, helps create a justification for taking action.
Now, it's really important to see that, according to the source, Venezuela isn't doing this in a vacuum. They are part of a much bigger global trend. You've got Russia selling oil in rubles and yuan. Even Saudi Arabia is openly talking about it. And China's alternative to SWIFT now has nearly 5,000 banks signed on. The world is actively building a plan B.
So the crucial point the source makes is that what we're watching isn't some grand show of strength. It's framed as something else entirely, a desperate last-ditch effort to keep control over a system that's already starting to crack.
And then the source draws this really startling, though hypothetical, parallel. It suggests that a familiar playbook is being dusted off, arguing that the exact same public excuse, drug trafficking, could be used to hide the exact same strategic goal, taking control of a nation's resources and politics.
The underlying message, as this analysis interprets it, is brutally simple. It's a warning shot fired for the whole world to see. If you even think about moving away from the dollar, this is what will happen to you.
But here's the real twist in the argument. The source claims this whole thing could backfire, big time. Instead of scaring countries back into the dollar's arms, seeing this kind of raw military power might actually convince them that their only true safety is to get out of the dollar system as fast as humanly possible.
And all of this leads to the source's powerful, central conclusion. The argument is that using force isn't a sign that a system is healthy. It's a sign that the currency itself is failing, that it can no longer compete on its own, and it has to be propped up with bombs and threats.
And so that leaves us with this final, really provocative question posed by the source. In a world where economic power is shifting and other countries are rising, what happens when you can't bomb your way to dominance anymore? What's the endgame then?